Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Harold Campos and today I will be speaking about the Logic Apps Migration Agent. The Logic Apps Migration Agent is a set of agents for integration platform migration to Logic Apps. It will incorporate Azure Logic Apps best practices by design, and it is extensible. It will provide enterprise scale and refactoring for BizTalk and other integration platforms. It includes stages for human in the loop across each stage, and it has a choice of deployment options, Azure or on-premises via Logic Apps Hybrid. Now, getting into the details of what the Logic Apps Migration Agent is, it is a VS Code extension. So you will need VS Code, and you will need an extension that you will need to download from the marketplace, the VS Code marketplace. And this extension automates the migration of enterprise integration solutions to Azure Logic Apps standard. It uses AI-powered analysis via GitHub Copilot to guide you through a structured migration workflow, all running locally within VS Code. And the extension provisions 3 GitHub Copilot agents, one called Migration Analyzer, another one called Migration Planner, and another one called Migration Converter. The migration agent works for proof of concepts, prototypes, fast migrations, refactoring, spec-driven design, or any other gradual modernization approach. Now, what are the capabilities of the agent? We call it agent, but it's a set of agents, as I said a few minutes ago. It starts with discovery, and then it will continue with planning. It will do conversion, validation, and deployment. So this is one of the things that we really liked about the agent when we had the concept of providing customers. When we introduced the concept of a tooling to help customers to come to Logic Apps, was to provide an end-to-end process of modernization rather than when we call it migration agent. It's really a refactoring agent, right? Because it will, as you will see in a few minutes, it will do multiple things. It will do discovery, right? So it will capture the information of all the BizTalk artifacts or any other platform artifacts that you provide. In the case of BizTalk, it can read from BizTalk application MSIs, source code, documentation. This will include schemas, maps, custom code, web services, references to it, orchestrations, business-to-business configurations, etc. You can also include documentation, and this is optional. It will analyze the optimum flows for the integration. It will define flows that will reduce your orchestrations in a way that can be refactored to Logic Apps. And this is essentially important because a few months ago, I shipped as an experiment what I call the BizTalk Migration Starter Toolkit. That is a piece of software that does conversion from artifacts to from BizTalk artifacts to Logic Apps artifacts, right? So if you have a BizTalk orchestration, it will allow you to create a workflow. Workflow definition in Logic Apps, but it will use some mapping rules. And I will talk more about those later when I show you how this works. But in that case, the migration starter, the BizTalk migration starter, was a mapping tool, a converter, right? What we are doing with this agent is we are providing an end-to-end path for customers to do refactoring of their BizTalk solutions, because it will take all of the information captured in discovery, and then it will take you through planning, where it will propose a migration plan with not only flows, but also technical approaches. And this is important because when I'm very careful on how to use the word flow, because it's not, if you have 10 orchestrations or 10 processes, in other integration platforms, it will not necessarily create 10 Logic Apps or one Logic App with 10 workflows. It will analyze, what's the optimum path for this solution, for the target solution in the cloud, Logic App centric, of course, and then it will create a new architecture that will leverage as many features from Logic Apps and native connectors, and it will extend to local functions and to other Azure integration services as needed. If it's running on premises where we don't have Azure integration services, it will go and it will try to connect to other artifacts, to other systems, but we will talk more about that very soon. So then you will have the opportunity to chat with the agent at each stage. So once it completes the discovery and then you are comfortable with the discovery, you move on to the planning stage. And in the planning stage, you will have an option to incorporate feedback and to ask for changes if you don't like how the flows were defined and how the solution is paving out, right? So and that will take you to the conversion stage then when you approve the planning, where it will generate your workflows and logic apps following the migration plan for each proposed flow. We'll implement the mapping of BizTalk artifacts to logic apps workflows, triggers, and actions, along with porting all direct code dependencies as well. So that's why it's key that when you are specifying the artifacts in the discovery, you are as thorough as you can, right? I mean, you provide a comprehensive list of artifacts and that you may have that you have available, right? I understand that in other configurations it's tough to do this, but the more you provide the agent to work with, the better. If you have the specs, add the specs as well, and indicate the agent that you have provided the specs if they are not captured in the discovery, right? While we have skills that read from specs as well, if they are not being read, incorporate this feedback into the agent, and then you will make sure that it captures that information as well for your solution. The next stage after conversion is the validation stage, where validation will be created for with end-to-end test cases. So, there are multiple agents in the market, and I'm sure that our partners and other companies are doing their own tools for this. But we made sure that we just didn't create the tooling, but we also incorporated synthetic tests or tests with synthetic data. So then you get a working solution. So, after the conversion and validation, you will have a working solution that will include test cases that you will be able to verify because they will be created in the output directory by inferring the type of data that gets into the schemas and input data and output data that you generate, right? So then it will run the test cases. It will give you a working solution, but on top of that, we will give you the chance to add what we call black box testing, where you will be able to incorporate your own test cases. For instance, you can ground it even more when you add your own input data, your own input samples, and indicate in an instructions file, these are the output, the corresponding output data for this input data, right? So you create sort of a mapping of the scenarios. So what this is doing is this essentially grounding even more the solution that we are grounding by providing you all of the scaffolding model and skills for Logic Apps solutions, because that's one challenge that we have. Logic Apps is a product that is very easy to use, right? You create a designer and then you start doing drag and drop of a trigger and actions, and then all of a sudden you get some performance that is not necessarily the performance that you have with a BizTalk environment. So then there are a number of settings and options that we can control, but sometimes the field is unaware of those, and we are incorporating them in the skills, so then you get good performance, right? I mean, you can continue optimizing it to get a better performance and then a better performance, and then you can get to work in the infrastructure part of the solution. Now, finally, we'll be able to do deployment as well. It will deploy all your created artifacts to your Azure Logic app in Azure or on premises artifacts and integration accounts. So it will do all of the deployment. It will, depending on the information that you provide, if it detects that this is an EDI-based solution, it will create integration accounts. It will do the TPM configuration and everything as you had it in BizTalk. That's why it's essential for you to add as much information as possible in the discovery stage, right? And this leads me to the other part of the advices that I provide to customers when using this agent is do these in stages, right? Focus on finishing the discovery stage first, right? Where you incorporate all of the BizTalk artifacts and that you have available, orchestrations, schemas, maps, pipeline components, dependencies, custom code, classes, etc., right? And make sure that you have them available. So, and then you finish with the discovery part first, And once you have complete the discovery part, you are comfortable with the artifacts that you have in your solution, and you are comfortable also with the logical groups that have been created. And this is where I go to the actual extension. What you're going to do is you're going to go in the extension and you are going to look for the migration agent, the Logic Apps migration agent here. And you will find it in the marketplace. You will install it, right? And then you will see it here. This is the icon. You will see that I have all of the artifacts for the discovery. And then in this case, I started the discovery this morning, right? And it created a number of flows. And for each one of the flows, it will give you the options to do analysis, plan, creation, execution, and then it will give you the code, right? So if I do this PO approval processing, then I do analysis, right? And then you will start the agent. The agent will start working, right? So I'll let it work while I continue with the content. So I hope this doesn't get too confusing, right? And then you're gonna have, once you're working on one of the flows, the other flows will be disabled until you finish with one flow, and then you move on to the next one. If you have feedback about the way how this was structured, because you will see information about patterns, about the general architecture of the solution in BizTalk, and then how we will be mapping to the Logic App solution. So then you can move on then, right? The reason why I included this slide here, content-based routing, is to indicate that if you don't have orchestrations, right? If that is the case, you can still use the agent, because the agent will read from the bindings file, right? And this leads me to the part where that is critical. MSIs are important, but make sure that you have bindings files as well, right? So if you have the bindings and exported bindings for your applications, that does a pretty good job as well, because the binding files, they are self-descriptive, right? They are self-descriptive, and they have tons of information that is used by our scaffolding model to create the artifacts in Logic Apps. Now, the second stage, following in order, right? You will see that you have the target architecture. In this case, it's called EDI, inbound processing, and this is very linear, right? But if you have branches, you will have the branches, and you will have whatever is needed to build a solution, right? To resemble what you had in BizTalk server or in any other integration platform, right? You will see that if I click next here, right, there is a migration gaps analysis. It will tell me, hey, this HIDX metadata file for this customer database ZOS file, right, which is basically a definition of a host files in a mainframe, is unavailable, right? So then I write to the agent, hey, find the HIDX here in this location, and then it will find it, and then it will open the definition and will tell me this is the definition of your HIDX file, and then by the time this is ready for testing, it will push it to the maps directory where it's supposed to be. So this is the part that is key, right? The agent will not only do the actual analysis, planning, and conversion. It will also do the part of pushing all of the artifacts to the right places. Once it has completed that part, right, say I do execute all here for all of the tasks that you see here in the conversion plan, it will do the tests, right? But when for it to be able to do the tests, you have to provide the right information on the bindings and everything, and it will attempt to connect to target system. So if your scenario includes, for instance, a trigger, or you have a receive location that is pulling data from FTP, SFTP, or an AVM MQ system on a mainframe, it will try to pull the data from there, right? So it will try to bring the data, it will try to connect to the MQ system on a mainframe. So that's why if you are already with the mindset of running this agent that runs on VS Code, that runs on a workstation, then this workstation will need the right access to these target dependencies. That's why you have to run this in an environment, a control environment, where you have access to your dependencies as well, so then your tests are successful. You can run it anywhere. I can run it in my laptop right now, right? But if I have to, if I need to connect to an IBM MQ system on a mainframe, or a DB2 database, or anything else, I need to have the proper connectivity to those systems. One of the comments that was brought by a customer who was testing this agent before we made it available was that there was a Docker dependency, right? Yes, the Docker is recommended for some scenarios, but it's not required, right? So just to make sure that if you get the warning that asking you to install, if you have it, fine. If you don't, fine as well. Now, the fourth stage, which is the validation part after the conversion had occurred, includes two types of testing: the end-to-end testing in the local environment, right, where you will execute full end-to-end test matrix for the method call. In this case, for this workflow, I will add the happy path for all of the scenarios and an error path as well. And it will do output content validation. Once it has completed the work for this, it will give you the option to do the local black box testing only if test data is provided. So this is the case where I told you, right? If you have the artifacts, this is still working. If you have the artifacts in place, and these artifacts, sample input, sample output files or instructions, right, on what to send, what the payloads to use, right, for schemas or input schemas or output schemas, then add it to a directory along with a test dash instructions.md file where you will be writing the instructions for it. And we will be blogging more about this because we already have a number of customers running this and doing the migration on their own, right? And this is essentially the part where you have more control because you're specifying what is the output that you are expecting, given an input. One more thing to add is that the value of, I was asked the question, do you recommend using more code on a workflow or more connectors on a workflow? Connectors, triggers, and actions, they are, we test them, right? We thoroughly test them. They go under this rigorous process of testing and engineering cycles. So then, you will not suffer of hallucinations down connectors because they are black boxes, right? So you will send an input, get an output. What it's being built not only is tested, but it's also grounded because each one of the connectors that you use, they are already black boxes that are tested, right? So we are just not writing code. We're not letting the model write the code, which is great code most of the time, right? But we are essentially relying a lot on the connectors and the artifacts that have already been tested and are part of the infrastructure of the product. Finally, the deployment stage, while this is still running, right, for one of the flows, the deployment stage is the one that I mentioned that, we call it deployment stage, but it's, if you go to the spec, you will see end-to-end testing in the cloud environment only if required, because you will not only deploy the solution in the target environment given a subscription ID, given a resource group, given the right access, but it will also attempt to do testing, the same testing that it ran end to end. It will try to do it in the cloud. So this is the part where the solution gets deployed, but besides being deployed, it also ran all of the happy path scenarios and the error path scenarios, right? So then you get the outcome that you expect, right? So for instance, in this case, when I finished for the PO approval processing part of the analysis, what it did first is it resembled the part of the orchestration, right? The receive PO, the create app, the decisions that it's making and everything. So then you can compare this with your orchestration, the persistence points and everything. It will show you the message flow and it will tell you this is the port, this is the operation type, the binding, the correlation action, and it will go through all of the details of the configuration of the message flow. It will show you the components of each one of the elements, and it will tell you what's the logic apps equivalent, right? There's a workflow, there is the child workflow invoked via workflow action. It will create this architecture for you. And if you don't like something, like say, for instance, I don't want this approved PO here, logic apps standard workflow, child workflow invoked via workflow. I want some connector. Change this with another connector. Change this with something else, right? So you have you are in control of what gets generated at every stage after planning, because in planning, well, you can rerun anything, right? Regenerate analysis by adding more artifacts. Let's say that you forgot artifacts. You can rerun it again, rerun that stage, and then you can do that in an iterative manner. But you can also suggest changes, and these changes, more than suggestions, and we may need to rename these. These are direct asks for the agent to work with, right? After that, then you will see missing dependencies. It will tell, hey, this is missing, right? A mail template.html, add it, please, right? Or resolution embed the HTML template because it's used to be sent to be used in a send email, right? So I have to add it. And some of them, it's just a warning, right? But in some cases, it will tell you, hey, listen, there is a blocker here, right? And in this case, you will be able to fix all of there are no blockers for the migration, right? You will see that there is a sendmail.sender.net helper class, right? That is available here, right? And there are other elements as well that you can validate. And again, so this is something that while you can complete a migration of a system in 1 day or 2 or even less, we don't recommend that, right? I mean, we recommend you to spend time on each one of the stages and then iterate, because we persist the results of the analysis and planning and conversion. So then you can do this multiple times. Once you are comfortable with one approach, then you can move forward to the next flow and so on, right? We recently had a customer that ran a very complex solution and did it I mean, if he will have started with this complex solution that relied a lot of custom code and complex patterns in BizTalk, it will have take them a team of people to do the work in months. He finished doing the work in about a week and a half, I think, including testing with this approach that I mentioned. And so I think it's going to be very useful, and it's going to be a game changer. As long as you can follow the guidance, which is basically essentially do the work of doing this in stages, right? So don't just try to finish. I mean, you can attempt it with a simple application to do it all at once, but what we recommend is to complete the whole process, in stages, so then you will get better results. Now, going back to the deployment, I mean, you will do the deployment, you will attempt to do testing on everything, but not only that, right? So we're making this agent open source, so then you can contribute to it. And we have left models for BizTalk. I mean, if you just use GitHub Copilot in BizTalk and you have knowledge of any of the integration platform products like MuleSoft, Boomi, or others, right, that you may have available, TIBCO, then you can create your own parser. You can create your own parsers, and then you can contribute back to the community. So then this becomes an exercise where you create a built-in parser. We give you the model on how to do a parser, so you can look at the docs that we are providing as well. You can add the skills. You need a number of skills. We have provided all of them for BizTalk, right? So then you can do a comparison. You can create your own maps, because again, this is work that you will likely have to do multiple times. So then you can incorporate back to the community. Same for you have to do a few more the completion of some additional steps, like registering the platform, creating what we call a intermediate representation examples. Basically, in some cases, what is the type of information that you get depending on the type of integration platform that you use, right? And that's pretty much it, right? So again, my name is Harold Campos. This is my LinkedIn profile, and I also have a channel where I upload these videos from time to time. I invite you to join, right? While this is still running, you can I will be leaving a link of a previous version of this with a complete example, so you can just follow the steps. But basically, just in the interest of time, because this is going to take longer, once the plan is complete, then the creation steps will show. You will do creation, and then you will have the option to do what is called the black box testing. So please let us know. I mean, just drop me a message or add a comment in the video, right? If you get stuck, if you need more information, we have plenty of docs about this, and we will be blogging a lot about this. So I hope you enjoy this presentation, and again, thank you for your time.